The rolling farms along eastern Victoria help to paint a picture of a rustic lifestyle where people coax and shape the land. What's sometimes hidden from that idyllic view is a dark side.
I'll never forget the moment that the phone call happened and they just rang and said, "Your dad's been found hanging in a tree."
Where the land takes much more than the people who shape it have to offer.
It was grabbing me. Every day it would grab, the grass would grab harder and tighter till the day where, you know, for me it was the only way out was to take my life.
I could picture myself hanging off the raft there, hanging myself. I could picture myself, you know, you used to drive and you think, you know, you plough straight into a tree.
53-year-old Joe Meggetto was born into farming, raised on his family's dairy farm in Warrego. Meggetto decided to buy his own farm at the age of 25.
It's okay to milk with your father and help him, but sure, you got your basic skills, but you've still got to learn a lot of stuff.
Over the next 4 years, the pressures that come with running a farm began to mount. The long days, trying to manage hundreds of cows in the weather, and trying to turn a profit.
I look back now and I believe I was starting to struggle because I was here on my own.
Isolation is a big issue for most farmers, no matter where they live, often covering vast tracts of land over very long days with very little human interaction. The nearest town from where I'm standing right now is less than a 5 minutes drive away. But when you're out here like this, you feel like you're out in the middle of nowhere. And more importantly, you feel like you're all alone.
Meggetto believes that isolation was one of the key factors that added to the mental illness that was beginning to manifest itself.
You've got these negative thoughts, you can't talk to your tractor, it's not going to answer you back. I certainly, you know, pulled my hair out and cried sometimes in the cabin of the tractor. I did that a bit. So it's really the loneliness and the thoughts of being by yourself and really nobody to talk to.
The son of Italian immigrants told no one of his struggles.
You bailing me oats today, Don?
Especially his family, instead creating an image of a tough, capable farmer who was managing the business and himself. But he wasn't managing. About 5 years into running his own farm, the negative thoughts and dark periods became more frequent and more extreme.
It was just one of those times that the guns are laying around and the bullets are just laying around, and I just picked it up out of the shed. I can remember picking it up out of the shed and just carrying it around. I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to use this on me. I knew it was there every day. I knew it was there. Once I'd changed my overalls or something to get washed or whatever it was, I'd take it out quietly and stick it in the new pair, and off you go.
Weeks went by, carrying the bullet meant to end his life, until one day, Meggetto was confronted by his brother Alan.
My brother, he turned up here one day. I was getting the cows along the road.
I said, you know, you got to start learning to settle down, and you know, we're all here for you, that sort of stuff. And next minute, he just pulls a bullet out of his pocket and says, "See this?"
I said, "I'm going to use this on me. I'm going to use this bullet on me."
Then I thought, this ain't right, something's going to happen here. And so I thought I'd better do something about it. So I just did. I just went straight to the police. There was nowhere else I could think to go.
Within 20 minutes, I had the police here at the shed here, and they just pulled me out from the shed, and we had a talk. I had to hand the bullet over, and they confiscated the guns.
The immediate threat was gone, but Meggetto's silent struggles continued, even after he got married in 2003.
Yeah, so we still up when I went to milk.
Eventually, he opened up to his wife and began seeing a psychologist for depression. But Meggetto says the person who had the most impact was his own doctor, a general practitioner who's a neighbor and, more importantly, understands the demands and the pressures that come with farming.
I continue to get dark times. Don't get me wrong, I'm a believer that you'll never get over it, but you've just got to learn to manage it. I'm managing it now.
Part of Joe Meggetto's continued recovery can be traced to Sallie Jones.
You are a lady. Look like you're having some pretty serious conversations.
The daughter of a dairy farmer whose life has also been touched
There's Dad and me.
by that dark, unspoken side to farming on this dried up land.
Automatically you would feel welcomed by him, you would feel warm, you would feel his authenticity. He just had a real presence about him.
Michael Bowen battled mental illness, including depression, for years while running a dairy farm in Lakes Entrance. In 2016, that illness had taken a visible toll.
Physically he looked fine, but he just wouldn't leave the house. He thought our house was bugged. He thought people were listening into his conversations. He was suspicious. He thought people were watching him in the paddock. It was insane. And then I was driving him in the car and I said, "Dad, are you suicidal?" And he just looked at me and looked at the ground and then just looked at me, and that was a yes without the words. And I just thought to myself, I'm just going to pretend that I didn't see that for what it was, and I awkwardly just sort of moved on with the conversation.
Two weeks later, the 53-year-old father and grandfather carried out one final and deliberate chore.
My mum called me at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon and she said, "Have you seen Dad?" And I said, "No." I said, I think he's with you, isn't he?" And she said, "I haven't seen him all day."
The police were called. A massive search was launched across the farm. That search ended the next day with the discovery of Michael Bowen's body hanging from a tree on the property where he had spent a lifetime working.
It doesn't really sink in, like, yeah, that doesn't happen. Like that, I knew my dad's views on suicide. We had many conversations about that, and he couldn't understand how someone could take their own life. So I know that my dad, it wasn't like a sign of weakness, then he was like, "I want to end my life." It was like, things must have been that bad for him that he believed that he was truly doing us a favour by exiting. That's hard, you know, and yeah, the ripple effect that it's had in our community and within our family, and just devastating.
For Jones, that devastation included wondering what would have happened if she had acted on the conversation with her father.
I've had to move on with that. I can't hold myself up because what's happened's happened, and it's now how I choose to respond to the situation that's happened. Pack 'em in.
Jones decided to open a milk processing plant on the family farm dedicated to helping local farmers get a fair price for their milk, something she says her father was very passionate about. She also chose to focus on their mental health.
I was not going to let Dad's suicidal death define his life. So instead I was going to somehow find the good in it and to create change, because it has to stop. The stats in Australia are ridiculous for rural men in mental health.
Australian farmers are twice as likely to commit suicide as the country's general population. In some parts of the country where the drought's grip is even firmer, it's believed that rate is even higher.
He's got dirt. He needs hay. Can you put him on the list?
Retired farmer Ray Akers delivers hay to drought-affected farmers to help them feed their stock. Farmers who often are struggling to cope.
It's just pressures on them, and it could be a simple thing. You might have a bit of an argument with a wife because there's a bit of tension. He goes down the paddock and he sees his cattle suffering, or his sheep bogged in the dam. Just something twists, just like that, and get out of this. And the biggest trouble with farmers, we've got the access to guns, plenty of rope in the shed,
The problem is that asking for help just isn't easy and almost seen as a sign of weakness, especially by farmers who aren't used to relying on anyone and are almost programmed to try to solve any problems that arise, any issues that arise by themselves.
So this is Aaron, and he's got 2 little girls.
Sallie Jones wanted to let farmers know that help was out there, and more importantly, there were people just like them struggling with the same kind of issues. So she came up with the idea for a calendar, each month featuring a farmer who struggled with mental health issues. The goal was to distribute them to as many farming families across the area as possible.
I must admit, I think a lot of the farmers were just feeling hugely anxious about putting themselves out there, because there is still this old thing that if you put your hand up, that you're weak. Joe, can you pull your car up?
One of the farmers Sallie reached out to was Joe Meggetto.
I remember it was an awkward conversation. I didn't know this man. I might have, yeah, well, I've been battling a bit. And that was the door, like that was how it all started. We had hours of talking on the phone and just downloading to me before he got to the point that he would agree to do the calendar.
Following the success of the first calendar and the way Jones says that it got farmers talking about suicide and mental health, she recently launched a second calendar.
This calendar tells 13 amazing stories.
At an event that brought all of the farmers together who shared their stories.
All right, beautiful. Looking at me.
Stories that are tough to listen to.
Walked over to my workshop where I had a gun that I had there to put down animals or whatever, and I remember I loaded it the night before because I knew the day was coming. I'd been working myself up to it. It wasn't far away, and I just remember I walked in there and I just unlocked it all, got the gun out, put it in my mouth, and the only reason I didn't pull the trigger is because a rep who looks after the farm's chemicals came up the driveway.
The farmer who had kept his own struggles silent for so long has now become one of the project's most vocal supporters.
There's one thing I've learned in the last 18 months since I've been doing this calendar, is to going up, introduce myself, stand up, mate. Stand up, mate. You've taken a brave step and gives a cuddle.
These farmers are so brave speaking out because they're the change makers. We have created a platform for them to share their story and for them to stand up in their own communities and say it's okay to get help.
And just by doing this calendar here, you've taken that first step to open up about it.
Health professionals believe the idea of farmers helping farmers is the kind of approach that's often missing in addressing rural suicide.
You know, if you keep telling farmers that they need to go to the white coat, that's one thing. But if a farmer tells another farmer that they understand what they're going through and that they've been through it, that's what has the most effect.
It's tough to gauge the extent of the problem among rural populations, but Sallie Jones and others will tell you from experience that it's a lot more prominent than most people can imagine.
I have had numerous texts and messages at 3 a.m. in the morning from suicidal farmers and have had many adventures of going and showing up and being on the coalface essentially. But this is not, I'm not trained in this is not my job, but I think just with what we're doing and people understanding those lived experiences, that they just reach out.
Joe Meggetto believes that reaching out to other farmers has become an important part of his own journey.
I look at this now, right here, right now, and this is medication for me. It's a relief, and the more I do it, the more I talk about it, the more people are saying to me that, you know, you're becoming an ambassador for mental health. And that I don't really look at it that way. I'm looking at it as it's helping me.
Meggetto says he's learning how to better cope with the pressures that come with milking 240 cows twice a day, every day, including the isolation.
So Joe Meggetto, for example, he pays someone to show up to his farm at 4 a.m. so that he's not lonely. Clever. It might cost him a few bucks, but he's made that financial decision to say, for me mentally, I understand that I get lonely, him, doing what I do. So he's put something in place that's proactive that helps him to manage that.
Meggetto says he spends much more time enjoying his job and the people around him.
What time's Blake coming home?
11:45.
Than he does in the darkness that came so close to ending his life.